No, again, just to reiterate the point, but I rather than my words or my opinion, I think I'm going to quote Senator Ted Cruz, who the chairman appeared on his podcast. And in fact, just to remind the chairman of Ted's own advice to the chairman, I made a board for you, Mr. Chairman. You were on the show with Ted Cruz, in which Ted Cruz said to you, I'm going to give you some unsolicited advice. Now, by the way, Ted Cruz, right, clerked at the Supreme Court. He knows the Constitution pretty well. But you guys know who Ted Cruz is, right? He's run for president a couple times. So Ted Cruz said to you, Mr. Chairman, you should have Hunter Biden in a public hearing. He actually said his advice to you is just have him in a public hearing. And again, I go back to what is the majority so concerned, or to use some of the words of my colleagues, afraid to have Hunter Biden sit at this desk? Mr. Chairman, you control the rules. You could give everybody 10 minutes. You could give everybody 15 minutes. You could give everybody 20 minutes. You could give your side as much time. We could go on for days here, quite frankly, because, again, you control the rules, as you just showed. But the one difference that you guys object to is you object to those. You object to the cameras because you don't want the American people to hear the answers. No, you want to take the transcript and release it 6 months after you've gone out and lied about what has happened. And so, again, because the gentle lady from Georgia, I know is such an advocate for women's rights, as she mentioned, and is so concerned about grooming, and apparently we don't have any standards here anymore. Again, I just want to remind my colleagues, because, I don't want them to forget about hypocrisy, okay? I don't want them to forget about hypocrisy. But, Donald Trump was asked about Jeffrey Epstein, and when he was asked, he said, Jeffrey likes him young. Well, how did the president know that? How did he know that Jeffrey Epstein likes him young? Perhaps some people are saying he was there, since you're so concerned, right? But again, I bring this up not to make jest. I bring it
Point
up.
of order, Mr. Chairman.
I bring it up.
Okay.
I thought we weren't going to interrupt.
We're going to stop the clock. We did this with Ms.
Okay.
Green. State your point.
Yeah, I'm just curious about the impugning of the former president's character. That we.
I don't have to do that. He does that himself.
Have we basically thrown that rule out? I'm just curious, or are we going to follow that rule?
Would you accept a pornographic photo?
Of Bill Clinton?
Yeah, we suspended the rule to the current president, but we didn't suspend it to the former president.
Oh, by the way, please, so you're making the point that we can disparage Joe
right.
Biden, but not Donald Trump. Please make that point to the American people. Mm-hmm. Please.
And
Bill Clinton's not running for office.
that's my point
All
of
right.
order, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
I'll wrap it up.
Suspended the rule on the disparaging the current president because this is a contempt proceeding with the Biden. So he's part of the investigation.
But the rule remains in place for all prior presidents,
I
including.
would say that, but in all honesty, they've broken the rule many times today.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, it doesn't apply to prior presidents.
It does not apply to former.
Okay,
All right,
very good. Thank you.
Listen, I won't talk about the photo and the 11 of them and the fact that he was on the plane and on the island anymore. What I will point out is the hypocrisy of today. The hypocrisy of today is you want to hold you guys break the rules by not complying with subpoenas in the last Congress, and now you're shocked. You can't believe after you broke all of that now it doesn't work. You come up here and talk about Hunter Biden's behavior, and you're so disgusted. But the guy that you all kneel to, okay, associates himself with a pedophile. But remember, I get it.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, that should be stricken.
I ask his words taken
A
down.
statement
That
of a
should be
fact, and it's his time.
It's a
Mr. Chairman.
fact.
I ask his words to be taken
Okay,
down.
there's a motion to strike the words.
Yeah.
Yes.
On what
Mr.
grounds? On what grounds?
Just say that we associate with pedophiles.
Right.
No, no, he was
Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, we have failed to pass comprehensive immigration reform up here for decades. But if you listen to the witnesses, some of them, and if you listen to my colleagues, you would think the world didn't begin until President Biden was elected. You would think it was dinosaurs, the wheel, Jesus, the world was flat, the world was round, Biden was elected, every problem. Like nothing happened before. You know, people pretend like everything was just perfect. But you know what? One of my colleagues, when bringing up statistics, showed why this is a farce. She brought up that President Obama deported more people than President Trump. In fact, President Obama deported more people in each term than President Trump. Well, hold on a second. If the border wasn't a problem until President Biden was elected, then how were we deporting all of these people in administrations before Trump was elected? It's because this situation has been going on for decades. So stop lying to the American people that none of this happened until President Biden was elected. Yes, my colleagues passed H.R. 2. They did. It was a wonderful messaging bill. They knew when they passed it, it was dead on arrival in the Senate. And see, that's what this place does. The Senate passes bills that are dead in the House. The House passes bills that are dead in the Senate. They wash their hands with it, declare victory, and say, we did something. Okay? It's fake. You don't pass a bill that you know the other chamber isn't going to take and say, solve the problem. And it goes for the Senate, too. It's just not on the House. And by the way, there were some good policies in H.R. 2. There are things in H.R. 2 that I would vote for. There are things in H.R. 2 that are bipartisan to help secure the border. But there were things in H.R. 2 that were outrageous because it was never meant to become law. There are things in H.R. 2 that would potentially prevent Jews escaping the Holocaust from coming into the country. Because there's all sorts of changes to asylum. There's all sorts of, if you travel through a third country, you can't come in. There's all sorts of language in there that, again, was never meant to become law. And I don't think my colleagues, by the way, put that in there because they would want to prevent Jews from coming into this country. But we've seen what happens when there is language in laws that isn't intended, like what happened in the St. Louis in 1939, where there were laws that prevented Jews on a ship escaping Germany. We denied them because we applied things that weren't meant for that situation. And so, look, you don't have to listen to me, right? My colleagues don't have to listen to me. I want them to listen to their own colleagues, Chip Roy, who is a conservative Freedom Caucus member, has said President Trump has failed to secure the border. Ron DeSantis, who ran wall commercials in order to become governor, said Trump didn't bid the wall and Mexico didn't pay for it. Okay? And Mr. Holman, I appreciate your energy and passion for children. And I appreciate that you have said that, have you seen terrible things that keep you up at night? I have. I've seen parents in my neighborhood bury dozens of kids because they died at school, because mentally ill people have access to weapons in this country and body armor and go into movie theaters and churches and schools and shopping malls and gun down children. You want to talk about a wall? You're talking to a wall. They're a wall. They don't want to help kids. By the way, they don't want to solve this issue either. Again, don't listen to me. Just listen to the speaker, who was caught on a call the other day saying that we can't solve the border crisis until after the election. By the way, here's Congressman Troy Niels giving it all away. Giving it all away. Let's read this. Let me tell you, when he's talking about immigration, let me tell you, I'm not willing to do a darn thing right now to help a Democrat, to help Joe Biden's approval rating. I will not help the Democrats try to improve this man's dismal approval ratings. I'm not going to do it. He's saying he's not going to do anything on the border. And he's from Texas, which needs help. He's not going to do anything because he doesn't want to give Joe Biden a win. You have members of this committee that have threatened to vacate the speaker again if they do anything on the border. Senator John Thune has said this is a unique opportunity. He said when Trump was president and Republicans controlled both chambers, they couldn't get done the policies that are being discussed now. So look, I'm willing to do stuff on the border. I'm willing to do it. But they're not willing to do it because they're doing what people hate about this place. They want to use it to raise money. They want to use it to politicize it. But they don't want to solve the issue. There's a deal on the table.
Gentleman's time
They
has
can solve the
expired.
issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. By the way, how are you doing? Good? Okay. Mr. Bobolinsky. Over here. How are you doing? Good. So I just have a question. We've been at this for 15 months now in Oversight. I know this is your first time here. But do you think Chairman Comer has proven that Joe Biden has committed a high crime and misdemeanor?
I believe with all the evidence he's gathered, yes, he's proven that Joe Biden has committed high crimes and misdemeanors.
Okay, and so I assume you believe Joe Biden should be impeached.
Well, that's up to you guys.
But do you believe he should be impeached? It's yes or
Do
no.
I personally believe
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
or
yeah, you.
under constitutional?
No. You personally, do you believe he should be impeached?
I do.
Okay, and you believe that because you believe Chairman Comer has proven that he committed a high crime and misdemeanor?
No, because I know that he committed high crimes and misdemeanors.
Okay.
I was involved and saw them happen.
Right, but obviously, with all the evidence, you must believe that all of these hearings for 15 months, that the chairman has proven that, right?
You re-ask the question?
Sure. I'll sum it up. I assume you believe he should be impeached, but my point is that the chairman has not yet moved for that. And so, look, Chairman, we got like 3.5 minutes here. I mean, let's just do the impeachment. I mean, why continue to waste millions of dollars of the taxpayers' money if we're going to impeach because you believe you've shown he's committed a high crime and misdemeanor? What are you waiting on? Let's just do it. I mean, by the way, we got Chairman Jordan here also, the double chairman. Why aren't you guys calling for the vote in your committee? When is it going to happen? When can we tell the American people you're going to stop wasting their money and just call for the vote on impeachment?
Gentlemen, yield? Gentlemen, yield?
Sure.
We don't do snap impeachments like you guys. We actually do the facts. We do oversight
So
according to the
you're never
Constitution.
going to call for it. You're never going to call for it. I mean,
Now you can
2
predict.
months?
You can predict the future. How
Well,
do you know?
You guys only have 6 more months probably in power, right, until the election. So are you going to do it in 2 months? Are you going to do it in 3 months? Like, tell the American people.
Does
can
the
we get a date?
Constitution put a time limit on oversight?
So
I don't think I didn't read that in the
So that means,
Constitution.
if you believe can't call for the impeachment now, then what you're admitting is you haven't yet proven that he's committed a high crime and misdemeanor. You haven't proven it yet. Otherwise, you would call for it, I assume.
We're doing our work. We're
Okay,
doing our
so
investigation.
they haven't proven it, right? They haven't proven he committed a high crime and misdemeanor. Otherwise, we would call for impeachment. So look, the chairman knows me well. I mean, I'm just here to help him, right? And so I just think we should do it today. Let's just call for it. I'll make the motion, Mr. Chairman. I want to help you out. You can second it, right? Like, make the motion to impeach President Biden. Go ahead. It's your turn. You second it. No, nothing. Okay, we got nothing. So I want to, with my last couple minutes, show the American people that they're never going to impeach Joe Biden. It's never going to happen because they don't have the evidence. Okay, this is a show. It's all fake. They just want to do these hearings. It's not leading to impeachment. They're lying to their base on Newsmax and Fox, leading these people to believe that they're going to eventually impeach the president. It's not going to happen at all, ever. Period. They don't even have the votes, even if they had it in committee. They don't have the votes on the floor. They know that. They got members resigning rather than taking a vote on the fake faux impeachment. Just ask Ken Buck, who said the speaker ain't going to get me to take an unconstitutional impeachment vote. I mean, boy. I mean, so look, I mean, if these hearings were a success, right? If what we've been doing for the last 15 months had convinced the American people that Joe Biden committed a high crime and misdemeanor, you can be damn sure they would have called the vote by now, right? But they want it to go on. They either want it to go on because they don't have the evidence.
Are you asking me a question?
No, I'm just looking at you.
Oh, okay.
But if you want to talk to me, we can talk.
Well, no, I think you haven't read recent data that shows the American people are well aware of the Biden's corruption.
Perfect. So then ask the chairman why he hasn't called for impeachment, Tony. He's right here. Ask Comer. Hey, Comer, how come you haven't called for impeachment? I'll do it. Watch. Hi, I'm Tony. Hey, Chairman, how come you haven't called for impeachment? When are we going to have the hearing? When is the vote going to happen? I mean, you believe it. He believes it. He says it every day on TV. I just don't know when we're going to have the vote. I mean, let's just go. We can save the taxpayers millions of dollars. So, I mean, look, I used all of my time to show that this vote is never going to happen because they have no evidence on Joe Biden. I yield back.
Gentlemen's time's expired. Chair now recognizes Mr. Burleson from Missouri for 5 minutes.
Recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Moskowitz, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me start by saying that obviously Chairman Comer's not here, but I think in light of what we witnessed earlier, I think it's important that together as a committee that we begin Chairman Comer's therapy session, right? A member of the other side wanted to confirm what the title of the hearing was, right? That Chinese propaganda. Well, we know the title of the hearing certainly isn't about impeachment anymore. And Chairman Comer has suffered tremendous loss. And we all know in our life what it's like to suffer tremendous loss. There's all sorts of different stages of grief, and that's the loss, obviously, of his impeachment hearing. And everyone deals with that different ways, and sometimes it takes time to grieve and struggle and fill that hole, that void that now exists now that he no longer has impeachment. But the only way we as a committee are going to help Chairman Comer get better is we have to get to the root cause, right? So for today's therapy session, okay, I want to talk about denial, right? The denial that the impeachment hearings are over. And the denial, obviously, that he started with the 1023 form, which was Russian disinformation. And so, Chairman Comer, psychology teaches us that, someone might be, like him, using denial as a defense mechanism. And signs include that you refuse to talk about the problem, you find ways to justify your behavior, you blame other people or outside forces for causing the problem, you persist in your behavior despite the consequences, you promise to address the problem maybe in the future, or you avoid thinking about the problem. And so in addition to these signs that Chairman Comer has been displaying, as we saw in the beginning, he also might be feeling hopeless or helpless. I just want the chairman to know that we're pulling for him. We really are. I know it's been hard to become someone who was used by the Russians, but the good news is that he set this hearing today on Chinese propaganda because we've already lost him to Russian propaganda. I mean, we got to build a force field around the chairman to make sure we don't lose him to Chinese propaganda as well. And in fact, you can see behind me, these are quotes from the chairman, Chairman Comer, every single solitary time, and there are hundreds more, that he went on TV in interviews and talked about this 1023 form, which was all Russian disinformation. But we got to make the chairman understand that it's going to be okay. We will get him through this, but he's got to recognize that denial is not just a river in Egypt. He is going to have to face the fact that he was taken by the Russians. Now, I want to address something else that went on in this committee by another member. And I say this as someone whose grandparents escaped the Holocaust. So my grandmother was part of the Kindertransport out of Germany. Her parents were killed in Auschwitz. My grandfather, her husband, escaped Poland from the pogroms. The idea that we pretend that behavior is acceptable and regular. There are no concentration camps in Ukraine. They're not taking babies and shooting them in the air because they're Jewish. There's no gas chambers. There's no ovens. They're not railing people in. They're not ripping gold out of people's mouth. They're not taking stuff out of their home. They're not trying to erase a people. They're Ukrainians. Stop bringing up Nazis and Hitler. The only people who know about Nazis and Hitler are the 10 million people and their families who lost their loved ones, generations of people who were wiped out. It is enough of this disgusting behavior using Nazis as propaganda. You want to talk about Nazis? Get yourself over to the Holocaust Museum. You go see what Nazis did. It's despicable that we use that and we allow it and we sit here like somehow it's regular. Oh, Mr. Chairman, I welcome you back. I'm sorry we were trying to talk together and get you through the hearing, but I look forward potentially to talking to you at a future session. So thank you. I yield back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Moskowitz.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, so welcome to Oversight After Dark. If you love James Comer at 11 o'clock in the morning, you're really going to love him at 8:30 p.m. So, members, the hearing was moved today. We don't have to ask the question. The hearing was moved today so that members could go to New York and attend the Trump hearing. How's he doing? He's complained that he's chilly in the courtroom. Is it chilly? Is it chilly?
Will the gentleman yield?
No, I'll assume it's
He's
chilly.
doing very good.
Okay, good. So, it was mentioned by the ranking member about really what we're doing here. You don't have to listen to my words. I would like to do a spirited reading of the campaign email sent out by the chairman. And it's on lovely stationery. In fact, it says, from the desk of the Oversight chairman. I'm not sure you can do that, but I'm not an ethics expert. It says, friend. President Biden is exerting executive privilege in a last-ditch attempt to stop the disastrous audio recording of his interview with special counsel from being released. And it's highlighted in yellow. Want to make sure people saw that. Just a few months ago, the White House bragged that Joe Biden had nothing to hide and would not exert executive privilege during special counsel Hur's investigation. They even said he had nothing to hide. That's in italics. Now Biden and his advisors are terrified that I, James Comer, will release the recordings, forcing the media and the Democrats to answer for the dismal decline of Biden's mental state. He even had attorney Merrick Garland write a letter saying that his interview falls within the scope of executive privilege. This could be the final blow with swing voters across the country. Okay. You and I know, hold on, we're not done, it gets better. You and I know he's not up for the job, but the mainstream's media refusal to report on it as only keeping him in the game. Stand with Comer. The Democrats, you sure about that? The Democrats are pulling out all the stops to stop the bleeding. That means coming after me with everything they had. If you're able, we hope you are, I'd be so grateful if you'd consider making a donation to my campaign. I sure need it to defend against the onslaught of attacks. Thank you for everything. James Comer, chairman of the House Oversight Committee. Without objection, I'd like to enter that into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
All right, beautiful. So again, Mr. Chairman, since you think this is the final blow, right, and obviously the chairman of Judiciary is here too, we only have June, July, and September before the election. We're not here in August and October. So, I mean, I'm sure the American people are paying attention at 11:30 p.m. where you buried this hearing because it's so important. When are we going to do the impeachment of Joe Biden? When is that going to happen? Is it going to be June? Is it going to be July? Is it going to be September? Let's just put it on the calendar. Let's just put it on the calendar. Pick a month. We're available. We were available at 11 a.m. You guys weren't. Just pick a month, right, so we can get it on the calendar and do the impeachment. So hold on. I'll give you choices. Ready? June. July. How about September? Okay. So we're never going to schedule this thing. It's never going to happen. He's sending out more subpoenas because he has no evidence. Okay. And yet here we go around and around and around. And so we get it. You'll raise money off of it. Congratulations to you. If you want, Mr. Chairman, I can get the transcript out. I can do a spirited reading. We can sit here. I'll do all 250 pages for you. I'll even put on like a Biden mask, make it visual so you can like really get in the moment. We just want to know, like, what's it going to take, Mr. Chairman, to get you comfortable? You go on Newsmax and you get comfortable. What's it going to take to get you comfortable to ask your friend, Chairman Jordan, sitting next to you, when we're going to schedule impeachment? So we'll do it again. Ready? How about June, July, September?
Does the gentleman know how many spare Biden masks there are available in D.C.?
I don't, but there's a lot on Etsy. You can get lots of things. Okay, so look, I'll yield the balance of my time to the ranking member if he wants to use the last 40. Oh, you have something to say, Mr. Chairman? Go ahead, please.
No, I was going to say you yielded to Ranking Member
Yeah, I'm
Raskin. He
done.
has
I
30
know.
seconds.
Go ahead, Mr. Ranking Member.
Thank you, Mr. Moskowitz.
Who's next? Mr. Moskowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming today, Mr. Shriver. Appreciate you coming. We've been talking about productivity, and this is going to be. It's a little awkward when you want to disagree with someone on your side of the aisle, but I have to dramatically disagree with my colleague, Ms. Crockett, who used data and statistics and facts to claim that this is the least productive Congress in modern history. First of all, this Congress removed the Speaker, okay, which has never happened in the history of the Republic. That's clearly that's a big accomplishment in the 118th. This Congress took 15 rounds to even elect that Speaker that they then removed, right, which was historic in its own right. And then they removed a member of their own party. That hadn't happened in 20 years, so kudos to them. They've had a failed impeachment of a president. I don't think we've seen that happen in a really long time. This Congress did impeach a cabinet secretary, though, without meeting any constitutional threshold. We haven't seen that happen in 150 years. This Congress wants to hold Merrick Garland in contempt and then possibly arrest him. I don't think we've ever seen that in the history of the Republic. We've seen a failed motion to vacate to remove a second Speaker. Again, history in the 118th. And who could forget that this Congress, on behalf of the American people, saved gas stoves and ovens and toasters and blenders and dishwashers from the communist grip of energy standards. So I think Ms. Crockett was pointing out that this is least productive. These seem to be accomplishments on behalf of the American people that are clearly historic and may never be repeated in another Congress. With that, there was a lot of discussion about the CBO report. Who is the CBO, Mr. Shriver?
The Congressional Budget Office.
Okay, so those are our folks.
Correct, Congressman.
Okay, and it's nonpartisan.
Correct.
Okay, and you mentioned a report that they issued, right? That report, which I have here, came out in April of 2024.
Yes, Congressman.
Okay.
That's the report I was referring to.
And even though it's nonpartisan, who controls the House in 2024?
I believe the Republican Party.
Okay, I believe you're correct. So on page 21 of that report, which is the congressional report from the CBO, it specifically shows the difference between the private sector and the federal government when it comes to teleworking. There's a chart which I have behind me, and I'm not going to do what Trump did and just circle Alabama, but I am going to circle that area right there, right? So we always constantly hear that we should run government like a business. This seems to show, according to the congressional report, our report from April, just a month ago, that the private sector is teleworking more than federal employees. Is that what this chart shows?
Congressman, that's how I read that chart, yes.
Oh my God. So the federal government is actually outpacing the private sector. I'm sorry, the private sector is actually outpacing us in teleworking. I mean, you think, like, my colleagues should file, like, a resolution of disapproval of the private sector because of all of this teleworking that the private sector is doing?
Well, Congressman, I always think that the work arrangements should be aligned to what best advances the mission of the agency, and this is the data I was referring to that shows that federal workers are spending more time in the office than private sector right now. Okay,
so that attack about all this teleworking that federal employees, right, is really misinformation, because we're below the private sector. We're really keeping pace, right? Would that be fair?
I think we're keeping pace, and I think consistent with what I've been testifying to today, we have to keep evaluating it, right? Like, our North Star is providing the best service to the American people, and we need to make sure that work arrangements like telework are advancing that, and I think that they are.
Thank you. I yield the balance.
I now recognize Mr. Moskowitz from Florida for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Fauci, good to be with you here today. I was not here, but I saw a member of this committee questioned whether or not you represent science and tried to make that in some offensive way. I just want you to know most Americans don't think she represents Congress.
So one of the things I've learned.
So I hear now you double Fauci. So I don't want you to be offended by that. I actually, similar to Representative McCormick, who was serving in the field as a doctor during COVID, I was running the logistics operation and the Florida response as the director of emergency management for the state of Florida for Governor DeSantis. So I was deploying masks and gowns and gloves. We were setting up field hospitals. We were setting up testing sites. We were setting up vaccine sites throughout the pandemic. And the one thing that became clear to me as a country is we were not prepared. In fact, we actually had many preparations for a pandemic, but both the states collectively and the federal government threw that out and kind of was just making it up as we go. One of the things I wanted to ask you, and I understand you're not in the response field, but do you feel, since you've left, that we are better prepared today than we were several years ago when COVID hit?
In some respects, excuse me, in some respects we are, but in others I'm still disappointed. And I think one of the things that was really a problem with the response was the degree of divisiveness that we had in the country about a lack of a coherent response, where we were having people, for reasons that had nothing to do with public health or science, refusing to adhere to public health intervention measures. What I think that we will do better, hopefully, is that the CDC, I believe, has now recognized some of the failings of the lack of communication and interaction between the federal response and the local public health officials. One of the weaknesses that we had in the United States that other countries didn't have was a disconnect between the healthcare system and the public health system, whereas the CDC can't demand information from local public health individuals. They have to volunteer to give it to them, and it isn't given to them in real time. So we were at a disadvantage.
Oh, no question. I saw that. I saw how the lack of investment in technology, right? We had states trying to share information with the federal government using, Windows 2000.
Or fax machines.
Fax machines.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So,
and so, we spent $7 trillion in two packages and two administrations. And one of my concerns is that I feel that, especially in supply chain, I feel like we're not that much better off than we were before COVID. Am I wrong in that assessment?
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong, but I hope that the CDC has made it very clear that they are trying to change that and correct that deficit of a separation between the local and the federal CDC so that we can get information in real time. It was very frustrating for us that often we had to go to the UK or South Africa or Israel to get real-time information because they had a connection between what was going on in the ground and their public health system. So they knew right away what was happening. We didn't.
Dr. Fauci, you talked about how, we live in partisan times, a lot of misinformation. And, colleagues on this body said, you should be, charged and found guilty. Of course, the only one that's happened to is your former boss. But, the question I have is, when you saw a lot of that disinformation, whether it was, we can use a disinfectant to do like a cleaning or do light in the body, or that, China's working super hard, President Xi's got it contained, all of the stuff that was being put out, were you concerned? What was your feeling at that time, working in the administration, seeing that come from the podium?
Well, I was very frustrated by that. It was very clear. I was put in a very difficult position that I didn't like, of having to contradict publicly the President of the United States. I took no great pleasure in that, but I felt it was my responsibility to preserve.
He must have thought you did a great job. He gave you a commendation right before he left.
Well, I felt it was my responsibility, as to preserve my own personal integrity and my major responsibility to the American public to tell them the truth. And if I could just take this opportunity, when I was saying that if you attack me, you attack science, I didn't mean that I am science. What I meant was that when the data showed that hydroxychloroquine does not work, and there are people saying, oh, it does, I'll give it to people, and we know it can be hurtful to them, then when you're attacking what I'm saying, that the science shows it doesn't work, and the science shows that bleach doesn't work, that when you attack that, you really are attacking science, because science has shown that it doesn't work. That's what I meant when you're attacking me, you're attacking science.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman's time's expired. Now recognize Mr. Jordan from Ohio for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Doctor, why was it so important that the virus not...
Chair now recognizes Mr. Moskowitz from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this hearing. I want to thank the subpoena that you sent. I want to thank Ranking Member Raskin and your work, the letter you sent to the committee. And I also support the creation of a commission to get to the bottom of what happened. Director, I just want to give you an honest assessment of how this is going for you today. Did you happen to catch the hearing many months ago in education where there were a bunch of university presidents and Elise Stefanik asked a very easy question and couldn't get an answer? Did you see that hearing?
No, I don't think I did.
Okay, well, let me tell you, it didn't go well, and the short end of that story was those university professors all resigned. They're gone. That's how this is going for you. This is where this is headed, okay? This is, I don't know who prepared you for this. I don't know how many times you've testified in front of Congress, but a president was almost assassinated live on television, not just for Americans, but for the world to see. And this being your first opportunity, I understand there's an ongoing investigation. I understand there's things that you can not talk about. But the idea that we're getting less than you did on television is something that Democrats, Independents, or Republicans are going to find unacceptable. My high school, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, was on the list of mass shootings that Representative Raskin held up. That very day, the school resource officer, a police officer, did not run into the building. He hid in the stairwell while the shooter was in the building. He stayed outside, never helped. Okay? He also directed other officers who showed up on the scene not to go into the building. When it was determined that the failures in response and training, and that the sheriff fired nobody in his agency, Governor DeSantis then removed that sheriff. I supported the removal. So here's my question. You said there's going to be accountability. I understand you don't want to give us names. When you say that, are you telling the committee that once it's concluded, you're prepared to fire the people on the ground who made poor decisions that day?
I'm prepared to take the actions necessary.
No, that's nonsense, okay? Accountability, the failure was human. That doesn't mean they're bad people. It means they failed that day, and a former president was almost assassinated, okay? Are you prepared to fire the human failure on the ground? Yes or no? When you have the names of where those failures were, they're people. It's not like a piece of technology failed. It was people who failed that day. Are you prepared to fire them?
I don't have an answer as to whether it
Well,
was
then how can there be
people-
accountability if you're not prepared to fire someone? And the reason why your name is going to be the person who's held accountable, the reason why members in this committee are calling for resignation, and I join in that, or for the president to fire you, is because you're saying there's going to be accountability, but you can't commit that people are going to get fired. Let me ask this question a different way. If Trump had been assassinated that day, if the gunman had succeeded, okay, would you have come and tendered your resignation?
I would still be sitting here because I would want to ensure the integrity of the investigation.
Totally
and would move
understand.
forward.
That's a fair answer that you would have set up that process. But would you have had the honor to come in front of the committee and say, a former president was assassinated on my watch, there should be new leadership?
I think that I have admitted that there was
No, that's what I'm asking.
grave
Would you have
failure
tendered your resignation if he had been killed?
that occurred on my watch, and I am accountable for that.
Okay, but would you have tendered your resignation if he had been killed?
I think that I've admitted that I've taken accountability and will take responsibility.
Okay. Well, let me ask I want to follow up on Representative Connolly's question. in which he asked about guns, and you were not willing to commit that that makes your job harder. This is not about the Second Amendment. If there were over 400 million guns on the streets, if all of those guns were machine guns, would that make your job harder to protect people?
Again, I think weapons that are
If,
out there.
if all
make
of
our
those
job-
guns were rocket-propelled grenades, would that make your job harder?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Perfect. This is not a trick question. Thank you. Okay. I won't ask the other 15 things I was going to do. I was going to do drone strikes, but it's okay. So that's all we were asking. It creates a challenging environment. It has nothing to do with the Second Amendment or people's rights, but it does make your job harder. So credit to Representative Connolly for asking that question. One last thing, Mr. Chairman, and I'll conclude. You know, there was a question asked, is an Iranian assassin more capable than a 20-year-old? And I have been tough on Iran. I probably have more resolutions on Iran than almost anyone in Congress. But I can tell you it isn't Iranians walking into schools and grocery stores and movie theaters and churches. It is 20-year-olds, right? And some of them are mentally unstable. And they have access to guns. And they're domestic terrorists. Someone talked about Christopher Wray. Christopher Wray has talked about domestic terrorism. And so, yes, we collectively come together on foreign threats, and I am not at all debasing the fact that there are foreign threats here and abroad, but there are domestic threats, and we have to get to the bottom of how we stop domestic terrorism, because it was a 20-year-old who walked into my high school and killed 17 people. He was plenty capable, and he was an Iranian. Thank you.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Timmons from South Carolina. Objection to order. Chair recognizes Mr. Moskowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Man, I love our chairman. I mean, people have called the chairman many things, different adjectives over the last 2 years, but I admire his courage. I mean, literally, as Donald Trump is running away from Project 2025, trying to put as much distance between him and Project 2025 because the American people know it's toxic, but not our chairman. No. Chairman, with all of his wisdom, he features Project 2025 in the hearing, one of our last hearings, right before the election. I mean, if the Trump campaign is listening, here you go, Project 2025 in a hearing. I'm sure they're real happy about that. But, you know, Project 2025 wants to get rid of NOAA, wants to get rid of the National Weather Service, you know, the people that tell you the weather and help us prepare for hurricanes. So I say that as a former director of emergency management for the state of Florida, for a Republican governor, actually, who responded to hurricanes. You know, maybe if once we get rid of it, if Project 2025 were to succeed, if Trump were to win, maybe we'll just do it with a magic 8-ball, or maybe with a Ouija board, or maybe we'll do hurricane cones like President Trump did, right? Where he just, you know, circled in another state that wasn't in the cone. So maybe what we'll do is we'll do hurricane predictions, like maybe it'll go to Mississippi, maybe it'll go to North Carolina, or maybe it'll go to all three. Oh, look, I made a smiley face. Maybe that's how we'll do the weather. You know, I could see it right now, right? Trump would come out and say, it's going to be raining cats and dogs today. Please don't eat them. Okay? But, you know, the name of this committee today is Failures and Incompetencies. So let's talk about the big Knish, right? The chairman's failed impeachment. Let's remember, we misplaced an informant over a year ago, couldn't find him, didn't know where he went. Another informant was indicted for providing false information that came from Russian intelligence. We used a second informant who was turned out to be an indicted Chinese foreign agent. And to top it off, the chairman was like, who could we find to make it even better? Maybe we can get someone to testify from prison, which actually we did here on Zoom. Here is the chairman's 300-page book report on impeachment. He said in his release, it is the strongest case for impeachment of a sitting president the House of Representatives has ever investigated. Wow, that sounds pretty serious. So I want the chairman to show the American people that we didn't just waste millions of taxpayer dollars to issue this book report. Mr. Chairman, the speaker is watching. You could call for impeachment right now, right? We got a little bit of time left before the election. I mean, you know, just ask the speaker. You could ask the speaker right now, or talk to him. Like, when are we going to schedule impeachment? Or is this just concepts of impeachment? Right? No? Okay. Well, I mean, here's the thing. I think that the chairman titled this, and I love the title of today's hearing, right? A legacy of incompetence, consequences of the Biden-Harris administration policy failures. I made a couple of edits to the title of today. So the title, I think, really is a legacy of incompetence, consequences of the Comer chairmanship, okay? Because all we've had in this committee for 2 years is failure. Failed impeachment, failure on this gas stove nonsense, failure on all the Chinese COVID stuff. They did nothing with that COVID committee. It's all failure. The whole House, the whole 118th Congress is failure. They removed the speaker, right? Then they tried to remove a second speaker, right? That's really great for the American people, right? Then they impeached the cabinet secretary. That hadn't happened in 150 years. They've had multiple CRs fail, right? They can't even keep the government open without both speakers crawling to the Democrats to be the adults in the room to keep government opening. So, I mean, literally, if we're going to talk about failures and incompetencies, we should just look at what we've done here over the last 2 years. And I want to end with this. I mean, literally 2 weeks ago, right, all we heard was about what the Haitian people were doing in Springfield. But no, the chairman wanted to top that. He literally brought a witness who proffered in this committee that the Haitian people would have been better off had they stayed in slavery for several more decades. Mr. Chairman, I want to spare you the embarrassment. You should strike his words from the record. No, you stand by his comment that the Haitian people would have been better off in slavery for 30 more years? Or should we strike that from the record? I just want to spare you that embarrassment. Okay, so the chairman...
All right, your time's expired. Before I recognize Mr. Timmons, I would love to be a fly on the wall when you find out that Joe Biden dropped out of the presidential election and his son pled guilty for corruption.
Why didn't you impeach him? Wait, why didn't you impeach him, Mr. Chairman? Where's the impeachment vote?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, when's the impeachment vote?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I mean, we have a 300-page book report, tens of millions of dollars.
Chair recognizes Mr. Timmons
Failed,
from South Carolina.
fake impeachment.
Mr. Chairman, I'll begin by pointing out that Hunter Biden is going to be sentenced on December 16th.
Hunter Biden's not the
and
president.
I bet you money he's going
Timmons, you need to take your medication and leave. Chair recognizes Mr. Timmons.
Mr. Chairman, you're several decades older than me. We know who's taking more medication.
All right. Hunter.
We want to identify the problem and try to come up with a bipartisan solution. Chair recognizes Mr. Moskowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Mr. Sessions. I think the threat of China is real. That's why I voted for the China Select Committee. And I would also like to come up with bipartisan solutions. But unfortunately, that's not what the chairman is doing with this issue. Tim Walz was announced as the vice presidential candidate, and immediately the chairman opens up an investigation into the vice president. In fact, the chairman goes on to say China has a vice presidential candidate who has gone on record praising the country as one of his rationales for opening this investigation and sending letters to the FBI. Doesn't sound bipartisan, trying to get to the root of the China issue. But of course, you know, as we're doing that, you know, I'll do, just to remind the chairman, just a quick spirited reading of some of the things that President Trump has said. China's been working very hard to contain the coronavirus. The United States greatly appreciates their efforts and transparency. It will all work out well. In particular, on behalf of the American people, I want to thank President Xi. Trump again. I just spoke to President Xi last night, and you all know he's working on the problem, the virus. It's a very tough situation, but I think he's going to handle it. I think he handled it really well. We're helping where we can. Another Trump quote. Just had a very long conversation with President Xi on the phone. He's strong, sharp, powerful, focused on leading the counterattack on the coronavirus. He feels they're doing very well, building hospitals in a matter of days. Great discipline is taking place in China as President Xi strongly leads what will be a very successful operation. We're working closely with China to help. More Trump. I think China is very, professionally run in a sense, and that they have everything under control. I really believe they're going to have it under control very soon. In April, supposedly it'll die with hotter weather. That's a beautiful date to look forward to. But China, I can tell you, is working very hard. More Trump. We have very few people with it, and are getting better. They're all getting better. The whole situation will work out. I think China has it really shut down. And I bring all of that up because all of those things, all of the praising of Xi, this is the rationale that the chairman has used to do other stuff. The chairman went on Fox Business with Maria Bartiromo and said, yeah, the Walls family, that's a scary family there, when he was talking about the Walls family. If you look at Maria's face, it looked like she vomited, it came up, and then she swallowed it again as the chairman was talking about that. Okay, I'm sure the American people think Gwen Walls is really scary. You know, the chairman went on to say that, you know, Walls is very concerning to me because we don't want to set our business model like China. Of course, Trump always has a quote or a tweet for that. Trump said, she's now president for life, right? And that's great. And look, he was able to do that, and I think it's great. Maybe we will do the same. Huh, that's interesting. That sounds like Trump looking at the Chinese model and wanting to copy it, which is what the chairman said about Tim Walz. So I'm just curious, is the chairman going to open up an investigation into Donald Trump wanting to copy the Chinese model, which is what he accused Tim Walz of? We know the answer. More Trump about President Xi. We love each other. And so, knowing how this committee has conducted investigations, knowing the evidence that they've manufactured or the witnesses they've had to deal with, the only evidence the chairman has on Tim Walz in China is that maybe he visited a Panda Express once and he liked it. That's it. That's what's going on here. So I don't want to hear about bipartisanship on China. We were there, and then the chairman just goes all over TV and wants to accuse the Walz family of basically being spies for China with no evidence. And look, I appreciate the kind words the chairman said about me on Newsmax the other day, calling me the court jester, so thank you, my liege. Appreciate that. But he said something else that I think really sums up what this committee has done. The chairman went on and said, my job was never to impeach. Well, that is interesting. So for 2 years, almost 2 years, we have sat here. Well, we have run impeachment hearings. Well, we have had cameras, hundreds of interviews, millions of dollars to spend. And now the chairman finally says, my job was never to impeach. He only says that because it didn't work out. And so, you know, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to have my staff send this to your office. I would love for you to sign it. And I'm going to hang it in my office as a reminder, okay, of what this committee was used for. Okay, so I don't want to hear about bipartisanship when they destroyed this committee over nonsense for 2 years. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Burchett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.